Welcome to our Thursday Live. It is going to be all about boundaries. I know everyone's favorite topic. And we have an expert witness with us here, Scott Nunnery, who's one of our family recovery coaches. He's got two sons currently in recovery. So he's been up and down the whole road 1,000 times and struggle with boundaries and setting boundaries and all that kind of stuff. And he currently works with parents who are trying to guide their kid through this whole addiction recovery process. But the boundaries we're going to talk about today really are applicable across the board. It's about being a healthier version of yourself, living your best life, doing the better thing for yourself and the other person, whether that's your kid, your spouse, your coworkers, your nosy neighbor next door, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So Scott, I like what you said a while ago about the word no. Start us off with that.
One of the first small little boundary that you can set is the word no. And, no can be a complete sentence. You don't have to say no and then go into any kind of dissertation on why you said no. It's just being able to set that simple boundary early on. If you're trying to practice baby steps, is just to learn the word no.
Right. And I think it's kind of a boundary issue for the person who wants to over explain.
Yeah.
Or what happens is like, I want to say no, but I want you to see my point of view on that. And I want you to agree with me and understand everything about why I said no. And so I just keep on at you. That's a boundary issue on your part, right? It's just like, now you're crossing there. You can't make them understand your no. You just say the no.
And, if you can't say the word no, then it's okay to say, I don't know, but give me time to think about it. I think parents of addicted kids, I know with when my sons would approach me with things that, hey, can I have the car tonight to go out? And versus saying no, it's okay to say, you know what, let me talk to your mom about it. Let me think about it. But sometimes we think we have to give a quick answer. And a lot of times they force us into yes when we didn't want to say it.
Well, a lot of times they'll say, I need to answer right now.
Right.
So what do you do when they say, I need to answer right now?
Well, again, being able to set that boundary of saying, I don't feel comfortable of saying yes at the moment. Give me some time to think about it. And certainly they're not going, it's not going to appease them probably. But you just got to be strong with that and say, give me some time to think about it.
Yeah. And I think I have heard people say, well, if I have to tell you right now, the answer is no.
Right.
So if I've got to make a decision this minute, then this is the answer.
Yeah.
So that kind of, I think, backs that off a little bit usually.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Scott, tell us just a little bit about your story and maybe some of the big boundary decisions that you've had to make in your journey.
Yeah. So we've been dealing with it. My son's 27, the oldest that went through addiction starting at about 18. So we're about 10 years into him. He's luckily, he's 2.5 years sober, but we certainly went through 6 or 7 rough years. And then my stepson is 22 and he's been going through it pretty hard for about 4 years now. And he's 9 months sober, but still struggling with some, things that are associated with addiction, such as deep depression, anxiety, and those type of things. But, we had to set, like most parents, because I wanted to control it and fix it and keep them from going to jail and keep them from, getting in trouble. I tried to control so many things, tried to fix it and just tried to, keep them from getting in bad trouble with the law and work and school and everything else. But finally, I started realizing that, all the rules that I was setting, I thought I was setting boundaries early, but I was more setting rules. And,
Right.
Hey, if you don't come in by midnight, then you can't have the car for a week. If you do this, then I'll take the phone away. None of those worked because they weren't boundaries, they were rules.
Right. So tell us, so for people who might be listening to that struggling like with what's the difference? Because a lot, especially, like modern day, they want to call them not rules, boundaries, because they think it sounds better, but they're really rules, like the ones they're doing. So what's the difference?
Well, boundaries, the way I've heard it a lot, it makes sense to me. Boundaries are I statements. So boundaries is what I'm setting that I'm going to decide in my life that I want to try to control. A rule is something I'm setting for somebody else, and I have no control over them breaking that rule.
Right.
I might set consequences if they break that rule, but it's boundary is more about my actions and what I'm deciding to do for me.
Right.
And what I will accept, in my life, what I will accept and not accept.
Yeah. I like to say it's okay to build a fence around your own backyard, but your neighbors really don't like it when you try to build a fence around their backyard. It's kind of out of
Exactly.
bounds.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
So, I think that's a big difference, but you, as a parent going through this to start with, right, you don't know, you think you're doing the right thing. You set all these rules and because you think you're dealing with a reasonable thinking person.
right.
And as we have come to learn, if your son or daughter is in addiction, there's absolutely no reason to that person's thinking whatsoever.
Right. You are in the upside down world, like
Yeah.
Stranger Things all the way. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Normal rules do not apply anymore. So, hey, Debbie, and hey, Sandy. Sandy wants to know, Scott, what do you think about using the word stop?
Well, you might have a better answer there than me, Amber, but in my opinion, if that's not setting a boundary for you, right? I'm asking somebody to stop, but I'm still placing that action on them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're either going to stop or they're not going to stop. I think more of a boundary is explaining that, I'm not going to accept this in my life versus asking somebody to stop doing something.
Right. So you can use the word stop, but for yourself, right?
Correct.
So it's like, I'm going to stop. You can say, stop being loud. You can't make someone stop being loud, but you can remove yourself from the situation so you don't hear the loud. So the stop has to go towards you. You can control you, but not them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hey, and that's a good, I guess, I was going to mention a minute ago, I had to stop setting all those crazy rules because they weren't working. So I finally had to tell myself, hey, stop what you're doing because, you're just doing the same old things. He's breaking the rules every time you set them. And the consequences aren't having any kind of positive effect. One of the reasons we want to set boundaries is we want a healthier relationship. We want to improve our relationship between me and this other person that I'm setting the boundary with. And if your rules and even what you might be considering boundaries that you're setting aren't improving that relationship, you need to figure out how to shift and make a change.
Right. What do you think? What is the big roadblock for people setting boundaries? Why do people struggle with that?
I think a couple of things, but honestly, in my case, and probably in a lot of other parents, is fear. You're so afraid of the consequences of what's going to happen. You're afraid of your loved one getting arrested. Certainly, if certain drugs are involved, they could die. And so I think you're just afraid of the consequences if things don't go well. If I set a boundary and it causes them to go and hurt themselves or do something harmful, then you're scared to death.
Right. And you can get held hostage by that, right?
Absolutely.
And then sometimes they'll flat out say, like, if you don't this, I'll this. And I call that emotional blackmail.
Sure. My son told me on more than one occasion, hey, if you don't give me the car, then I'm going to go out and use even more. You can't control me. Things like that, just threatening things back. Because again, we're not talking about a rational person. We're talking about an irrational brain that the disease causes them to react these type of ways, and it scares us to death.
Right. And then, so like, let's say your son says, if you don't give me the car, I'm going to go out and use more. Or, if you don't give me the car, I'm just going to have my friend bring it here to me. Right. Yeah. That sounds like a classic, right? What would you say in a situation like that?
Well, for a long time, I probably would give in on occasion. And I know, some parents may think, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. But when you're in the pressure of living with two addicted kids, you do a lot of things you never thought you would do. And so I've certainly given in to those boundaries and just thinking that, hey, okay, well, maybe, if I just let him do this, maybe it'll be okay. And then, finally, after you learn by trial and error that doesn't work either, finally you realize you have to accept the fact that, hey, I'm just not going to accept, you reacting to me that way. I'm going to accept to pull myself out of that. Or, eventually it may get to where you just say, I'm going to accept not to live in this.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think particularly if someone's doing some kind of an emotional blackmail, at that point, if someone said that something to me like that, I was going to give them the car, but they said that at that point you can't, because then not only it's not healthy boundaries, but you're training them to pull that. I call it the ace card every time. You know, they know what your button is, and then it gets to where they pull the ace card out every single time, and you really get held hostage by it.
Yeah. Well, and by then it's just way out of control, as you can imagine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not even trying to pretend not to use. No. They're just threatening it. You're way in there.
Exactly.
Okay. Gotcha. What are some of the harder boundaries that you've had to hold in the past?
Well, money, that comes to mind, is that whether they're living with you or living, in another place, is always asking for that $10, $30. Hey, I need help this week. And you think, okay, well, I know he's struggling. He only makes $13 an hour. Maybe I can help him a little more this week. But money, I think, was and has been and still is with my stepson. And he knows to go to his mom for that still to this day. And we struggle with that as a family, trying to cut that out. Mm-hmm. So I think money, certainly, and there's a difference between setting a boundary that's going to be, if you break that boundary, that you're gonna hurt that your child, versus when they really need help. If their car breaks down and they've got a flat tire and they're stranded on the side of the road, if they call you, it's absolutely okay to go pick them up, because mm-hmm. you would do that for a friend, right? Mm-hmm. But if they call and tell you that, hey, I need an oil change, and if I don't get my oil change, my car, you probably wouldn't pay for your friend's oil change. Right.
That's a good way to, I like that. It's like, would you do that for a friend, or would that be weird for a friend? Would a friend even ask you to do that? But I got to tell you, Scott, my thought was, when you said that, if you got an addicted kid, especially, and they're responsible enough to get their oil change, they need to get their oil change. I'm like, well, are they really addicted?
Well, I probably can't cite an example of that called and wanted his oil change. You're right.
Responsibility.
True.
Tina says setting a boundary is one thing, but holding the boundary is the other thing, especially if they start begging, crying, pushing your buttons, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's, the unhealthy part of that is that don't ever set a boundary if you know you're going to break it. And, I know when we set them as parents, we think we're going to hold to them, but there's some boundaries that I used to set that I knew if the pressure came on and the crying started or the yelling started or the pleading started, I knew I would probably give in. Mm-hmm. That's obviously not healthy and actually just very harmful to trying to get them help.
Right. I call that the big talk, right? You throw out the big, it's like a bluff almost.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we found out with our two boys, the only time they ever reached out for help is when they were put in that corner and they had no other options. Mm-hmm. Because the disease just doesn't let them tap out and raise their hand and say, hey, I need help. Mm-hmm. Something has to force them into a certain situation to where they really have no other choice.
Right. It's got to get uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think if you can think, as a parent, it's so hard, because even when we're setting boundaries for us, we still think in some way that's hurting them. And if you can shift your thought to say, the only way I'm going to help them is if I set these healthy boundaries and actually hold to them, then I know I'm helping them. And when you finally get that in your brain, that, and so it makes it so much easier when the pleading starts and the crying starts and the yelling starts. If I know, if I hold that boundary that it's going to help them, it helps me to hold that. Right.
I think too, one of the things I talk to families about is, if you don't hold the boundaries, what's going to happen is you are going to become resentful, get angry, and then you're going to act bad like a psycho beast, and you're crossing their boundaries, and now you have a boundary issue, right? Because then you're controlling, nagging, threatening, saying, I did this for you, I did that for you, and now you're the one with the boundary problem, not them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some examples I can share there with you. I would, how many of us have gone and when your kid goes to work and 10 minutes later you go to his work to see if his car's sitting outside the parking lot. It would even get so bad that I actually did that a couple of times, and he just had his car parked there. He actually wasn't inside working. So I would go maybe into the grocery store to see if he's actually in there working. Same thing with school, going by the school, taking them. I used to think if I actually took him and dropped him off at school, it ensured that he would go there. Well, he would walk in the front door, out the back door. And I mean, so just you become crazy.
Yes,
trying to chase
cat and mouse game. It's like your whole life is wrapped up.
I would get up, I think I've shared this story with you before, but I would get up at 6 a.m. and the first thing I would do is look at his phone bill. I would go on to Verizon, open up his phone bill, and I could see what time he was texting till. I would see who he last called at 3 a.m, was at his drug dealer. And that was my routine for probably a year, is to look at his phone bill for my first 30 minutes of my day. And that's how I started. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's a good way that's breakfast of champions, right?
Exactly.
That's a good way to have a bad day.
Yeah.
So it's like the way to start, like what you're saying is like, you got to set boundaries for yourself. Like, I'm not going to let myself turn into a resentful lunatic. I'm not going to let myself be consumed by like all these things you're saying, like making sure you're doing this or doing that. So it's the first place to begin doesn't have anything to do with them. If you don't have control of you,
exactly,
what are you doing trying to control them? You know what I mean? Get control of you.
Well, I find like a couple ones that I said, I think that are kind of simple is that, I'm no longer going to call in sick for you at work. If you lay out sick and don't go to work, I choose to not call and try to protect you from work. If you, don't turn in your homework assignment, I'm not going to stay up until midnight, the night before it's due. I'm going to choose not to do your homework for you. And these are all simple things, but I was so chaotic trying to control this thing that I did all those things. And finally, I just said, I've got to stop. And it's not setting a rule that if you don't turn in your homework, you get your phone taken away. I choose to not do your homework for you.
Exactly. Because then you're allowing the consequence.
Exactly.
Right. Rather than you trying to reward, punish, and all that kind of stuff. So what about if your kid is still in school, maybe they're young, what do you do if they are just not getting up for school?
I think you let them sit there. You let them stay in, and certainly, let's say they're 13 or 14. I think as a parent, most parents would consider you to be a bad parent if you let your kids stay at home. But after you've after you've gone through it, with addicted kids, you realize that, hey, there's nothing I can do about it. And if you stay out of school, there's consequences that the school will place on you. And I need to let you feel whatever those consequences are. And, after a few times, I think you'll start to realize that you probably don't need to stay out of school, but you got to let them feel it.
Right. Yeah. Even with my son who's 9, we're trying to do homework and he's like, I don't want to do that, or that's not true. I don't have to do that. And clearly I know to do. I said, okay, it's your homework. I don't care. Like 9 years, I don't care. Like if he gets a 0, he gets a 0, right? Like if you start out healthy, understanding your lane, your side of the street versus their side of the street, even at a really young age, they'll like you better and you'll like them better. Everybody will be happier.
Yep. And it's so helpful once you finally learn that with your addictive kid and apply this to other parts of your life. It is so freeing and it is so much of a better, healthier feeling. You learn to have better relationships with your friends. You learn how to have better relationships with family members. It really, once you kind of start to get the art of this thing, and like you said, staying in your lane and setting some healthy boundaries, and even at work. How many times do we have a boss that is overbearing and, asks way too much of you and you think you think it's, I got a terrible boss and I don't, but you're working 60 hours a week and it's taken away from the rest of your life. Is if you can set that healthy boundary, so it helps in a lot of different areas of your life, not just through addiction, but certainly it's critical for addiction because your loved one's never going to get better until you start having healthy boundaries.
Right. And I think most of it is just making the decision that you're not going to participate in the chaos. Yeah. Right. That if you just want to break it down to like the simplest terms, it's not, you're not going to do this anymore. You're not going to, I'm not going to participate in the chaos. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm a parent coordinator at a rehab right outside of Lawrenceville, where Zach went. And one of the big things we have coming through there is parents not being able to set boundaries with the law. Hey, your kid just got a DUI. What do you do? I had a mom call me last Saturday, and her son had gotten arrested for the third time for a DUI. And she says, I know what you're going to tell me. I shouldn't go get him, but should I go get him? I'm like, no, you should not go get him. So she called back the next day. She was so excited that she waited 8 hours before she went to get him.
You got to start somewhere.
So, you might consider that a small success, but, you wonder why he's got 3 DUIs, because you're going to get him every time he has a DUI and things like that. But it's so hard when the law and you think if he gets a felon, how is he ever going to get his life back together? They certainly get their lives back together, even with felonies and all that. If they want to get their lives together, they certainly can. But that fear cripples us. But the law, I think, is a hard boundary to set.
Right. Another one to me, I think, is guilt. People feel like they let guilt hold them hostage.
Sure.
About things. Sometimes it's like, well, I feel guilty because, me and their dad divorced and that had this bad impact on them. And then you get held hostage by the guilt,
Well, it certainly hits home for me. I divorced when Zach was 10 and I felt so guilty between 10 and 18, especially. And then when his addiction started coming on, I thought I caused it, and because of the divorce and all that. So certainly guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to take some questions here in just a second, everybody. So go ahead and put them in the chat, and we're going to go back through them. And if you guys got questions for Scott, we'll be happy to answer them. In the meantime, there's a couple of questions I have for you left while they're putting their questions out there, Scott.
Yeah.
One is, you were mentioning just a little bit ago about parents calling you, the parents of the boys that are in the sober living facility. And tell us about that kind of boundary. It's almost like vicarious. They're trying to have bad boundaries vicarious through you. That's what I call it, like vicarious codependency.
Well, yeah, I think I shared earlier that, at this facility, in the first 30 days, they don't have their phone. I think in the first 60 to 90 days, they normally don't have a car. And, these are the boundaries of the facility. But it's funny, in the first couple of weeks, they'll get a call from their son that says, hey, I can't live without my phone. This place sucks. If you don't get me out of here, if you don't get my phone back, I'm leaving. So the first thing a parent to do is call me and say, hey, I know you guys have this rule, but you have this boundary with the phone. But, my kid's so special because he's really tied to his phone. Do you think it'd be okay? I think it'd be all right if he just gets his phone. And they ask you, through me, will I help break the boundary to get there? And it's all about fear, right? They're afraid they're going to leave the rehab. And so we get asked to break those boundaries. The majority of the people that come through there certainly have requested that over the first month. Right.
So it's like somebody's finally holding a boundary with them, which is what the family members wanted all along, right? They want their loved one to respect people's boundaries, and you're trying to teach them that, right? This is the first time ever. And then they're coming in, they're trying to undo it. It's like, you better be scared that your kid's going to come out there and still be the same.
Exactly.
The phone is the drug dealer, so they shouldn't have it because the phone is the drug dealer. But even if you take that off the table, it's about learning to respect a boundary.
Exactly.
The fact that a rule or whatever applies to them and they have to follow it, even if they don't agree with it, that's a recovery lesson.
Exactly. And another boundary, Amber, is that they'll say, well, he calls me every day. And we say, well, it is okay not to answer.
Okay.
If
they want you to make them stop calling every day.
Yeah. If there's a problem, it's like, well, I tell him to stop calling. Well, again, that you're asking them to do that and you have no control over them calling you, but you certainly have the freedom, and you can set the boundary that says, I'm not going to take his call today because I know it's going to be chaos. I know it's going to be begging me for this, that, and the other. And, we can set that boundary as I don't need that in my life because it ramps up my anxiety. It ruins my day. And, you put them in that rehab for us to help them. And it's okay for you to take a break and not take that phone call.
Right. And if something big's really going down, I will let you see my number coming up.
You'll see my number. Answer
you
my
need
call.
to know it. You'll see my number.
Exactly.
If it's not that, you're going to be all right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. it's almost just trusting the process. It's this thing you want for them so bad, but you've got to let it happen too. You
do.
Got to let it happen.
Exactly.
Now, the other last question I have for you, Scott, was about, you were also talking to me about sort of the ultimate last boundary, but it's really, I honestly wouldn't even call it a boundary. I would call it drawing a line in the sand on purpose.
Yeah.
To let them sort of, I call it hang themselves, not literally, obviously, but it's kind of like, instead of saying I'm kicking you out, you find some boundary that they're not going to stick with, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So that when they out themselves, that was on them.
That's right.
Give us some examples of that, because you were talking about you've had to do that before.
Yeah, we had to do it with both boys. Eventually, when we got so sick and tired of being sick and tired and nothing seemed to work, we finally just decided, because of safety, honestly, is that we didn't want to live this way anymore. And for us to be safe, because we had, we had a daughter in the house, and who was, 16, 17 at the time. And even for our adult safety, we just didn't want to live in that drug chaotic world. And so we finally just set a boundary that said, hey, we just choose not to live with drugs in the house and with drug dealings going on through the mailbox and certain things. And that, if we see more evidence of this, then we're just going to choose for you not to live here, and that we don't want to live with you here anymore. And so eventually I had to go sign papers at the courthouse and evict both our boys.
Wow.
And that is the last resort. But, for safety reasons and so forth, that when you finally, you'll know when you're to that point.
But the point is don't set one of those thinking they're going to follow it. When you draw that line in the sand, you're drawing it knowing they're going to cross it. And what you're trying to do is make them have to be responsible, instead of, it's like, why are you doing this to me? I didn't even do anything. It's kind of like, okay, it's their choice at that point, whether they want to step up to that plate or not. But so many parents say, if this, then that, thinking that that's going to make the person be like, oh, I better not. I'm going to stop doing that. Like, in what universe? Never, ever seen it happen in my whole career.
Nope. No. And I had learned through so many mistakes of trying to take the car away and taking the phone away, and realizing that they broke those over and over again, that once we finally set the boundary on the house, I was ready to uphold it. And, it didn't take but a couple of days after setting that boundary that they broke it. And then I just followed through with the process and evicted both of them. Yeah. Yeah, did 2 different points, but I had to go through that process twice.
Not both at once, twice. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think too, how you say that boundary is probably important. If you're yelling and screaming, then you are not practicing good boundaries.
Absolutely.
You're out of bounds when you're doing that. So it has to be calm, well thought out. So never communicate one of these things unless you're in a solid place. You've really thought it through. You've really come to terms with what you're going to have to do when they don't do it.
Yep.
And you're ready. Don't impulsively in an argument throw something out.
Yeah, I think, we talk about that language of addiction. So you certainly, you've got to learn that language as a parent, that it is, you're telling that from a loving, a feeling. You're telling them that really through love, and that there absolutely is no emotion to it. There's no threatening. It's just, hey, we've decided not to live this way. And very calm, and, can be actually a short discussion. It doesn't have to be this big, long, drawn out argument. It's very calm and just a statement. And then a lot of times I'll say, then like walk out of the room. Correct.
Because they're going to want us to keep that conversation going. And the longer that conversation goes, the more likely it's going to start going bad, getting loud, turning into an argument.
Yep.
It needs to be, leave it on the coffee table, like short and sweet, and then leave the room. Don't say, I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Yep.
Leave the room.
Exactly.
If you're still in there engaging in it, then they're going to push your buttons till you lose it, basically.
Drop the mic. Yeah.
Yeah, mic drop. There you go. I love it. Yeah. All right, I'm going to go through some of these questions and comments here right quick. Oh, we got a lot, Scott. It's going to take me a second. All right, here we go. I think we did this one. Hold on. Sorry, I'm not good at this multitasking.
I'm glad you're doing it, not me.
All right. Kathy says, if you have an addicted child who won't get help, who doesn't live with you, is it best to block them because of all the drama she's pulling me into? I have a hard time because she does know how to push my buttons. She calls and calls and calls all the time. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. That's a great question, Kathy. And I think you're exactly right. You know, when they don't live with you and they're an adult child, and you certainly can't make them to go to rehab, but you can choose what you will accept in your life, right? So if those calls, and we have that still occasionally with my stepson, calling and causing the drama and the chaos. And I would encourage you to set those boundaries and have that conversation with her that, hey, if you call and it's all about drama and all about these things, I'm going to choose not to continue the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to call and let's talk about the weather, if you want to talk about how I'm doing, if you want to talk about the dog, I'd love to talk to you. But if it's going to be about, the chaos and about all the things that are going on due to your addiction, then I choose not to discuss those.
Right. Yeah, you can set a boundary for yourself that, Wednesdays at 2:30 to 3:30, you're usually available. That's a good time to call me. Love to talk to you. Yep. Right. So you're not even saying I'm not going to talk to you. You're saying I'm available during this time. That's a you boundary, right?
Yep.
Which is different than stop calling me with all that drama.
Yep.
It's different. It's a you thing. It's an I statement. Yeah.
Well, we had to with Cameron. He's good at texting at 2 a.m. Because he's up, he's wired up, and he may text at 2 a.m. because he doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to go to work. So we set the boundary is we're gonna turn off our notifications. If you text me at 2 a.m, it's not gonna go off. I'm not gonna respond to you at 2 a.m. I'll respond to you when it's convenient for me, but don't text me you can text me at 2 a.m, but I'm not going to get it. And I just want to let you know I'm not going to get it. But
yeah,
we certainly had to set that boundary because it was.
Yeah, I answer text between this and this. Here's the store hours right here. Like these are the hours I answer text. Sort of. And let's say if you're laying there, one way to do it is just if you're laying there and you see the text, maybe you're up, doesn't even matter. Maybe you're up and you're in the mood to talk. But if you see a text at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't care if you do want to talk. Do not do it because you've just trained them that they can text you at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you can just train people. You don't even have to really say it all the time. You can just train people. And if they always text you in the middle of the night, but you never answer until 9, they'll figure that out.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. Sandy's got one. Let's see. As I see it on both ends, the key word is acceptance, for which I'm practicing. With acceptance and unhealthy behavior for quality of life on both parts. Am I on the right path? Correct path?
Wow. You might have to help me here, Amber. Sandy, I'm not sure about that. I do think when you say acceptance, I'm not exactly sure what Sandy might mean by that.
Does that kind of mean, I think maybe it just means sort of let go, accept, almost kind of like a hand it over in a recovery language kind of be, okay. Maybe like accept the natural, like let the universe, that's the way I took it, Sandy. If that's not the way you meant it, pop that up there in the chat or comment so we can answer your question more effectively.
Well, and I do think once you accept the fact that they do have this disease, it certainly helps you to start, learn more about it. That's what I had to do. I had to go learn about addiction because I didn't accept it for so long. I tried to deny it. I tried to think that it was a phase that they were going through, and I had a hard time accepting it. So certainly I do think that's, probably the first step as a parent for you to start being able to go get help and learn how to deal with this. And then certainly it's not only boundaries, but you learn all kind of other ways to deal with addiction. But yeah.
I like that you said that because it's about you getting help. And a lot of times family members have this thought. The thought is this, especially if it's a spouse. The thought is, you're the one with the dang on problem. Why do I gotta get help? And you know what? I can respect and appreciate the thought because I can promise you I would have the same exact thought. However, you're wrong.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they have a problem. Their life is good. You feel like you have a problem, which is
exactly
right. So you are the one that should be seeking the help first. So You got to really get your head around it.
Exactly. There was a good quote in that book on boundaries that I'm reading, and it said, irresponsible. An addict is irresponsible and happy. A parent is normally responsible and angry.
Yeah.
Because we try to deflect all those natural consequences, and it makes us so resentful, so angry. But you're right. I used to talk about all the time how our kid, our two boys, that we needed to get them fixed, and how everything was wrong with them, until I finally started learning more about it. Certainly learned that I had a role in it, because I'm a family member. This is a family disease. Mm-hmm. And I had a role in that family, and I had to figure out how to go get help for me. And so that if I could improve me and improve how I contributed to the family, I certainly could start helping it versus adding to the problem.
Right. Because I think what you find at Hope for Families is that someone's chances of getting better and beating addiction is a whole lot more connected to what their family does, and how, whether the family gets it or not, and whether the family's willing to do the work, way much more so than if the person, I know everyone out there is like, they have to want it, and they have to hit the bottom, and they have to be willing to do whatever, and humility, and crawl across the desert naked or whatever. The problem with that thinking is that they will get to that point, and it'll last 10 minutes. And in 15 minutes, what are you going to do? Because that comes and goes. That's why that doesn't work, right? Yep. If the family gets it, and I'm sure you've seen this at Hope for Families, we say this all the time, once your family starts coming to see us, your career is over. That's right. When those people see me, I say, you might as well stop, because you're done now. Your family's crossed the hall, and I'm telling you, it's over. They done got smart, and whatever you used to get by with isn't going to work anymore.
Game over.
Right. Right. And we're finding that even the people that are in our invisible intervention, like, things are turning around really fast. And it's when you decide you're going to get some help, you'll be amazed how fast things start to shift.
Exactly.
Let's see here. I just got completely lost. My son's ordering drugs off the dark web delivered to our mailbox. He just got out of jail yesterday, all ready to go to rehab and make a life. I let him use my phone for music, got my phone back, and he's planning big drug deals already. I've done absolutely everything I know to do. Rehab, kicked him out, psych care, counseling, bipolar, PTSD. He's always got me with the guilt. His older brother died because of drugs. He has no insurance, no good care, and you're right. Tell us what you think about that, Scott.
That's tough. Heart goes out to you already having lost a child, and that's tough. So certainly heart goes out to you. I think just in her Senate, in her writing there, I think, you probably know what you have to do is to set that back. You've tried everything. I had a similar experience where we were coming home from Christmas one year, and he borrowed my phone in the back seat, supposedly wanting to listen to music or something. And you get the phone back later. They thought they had deleted the text, but he was setting up drug deals for us to come back for a family function. So I certainly can relate, but I think again, there, you just have to set a boundary that protects you as a parent. Certainly probably not safe with them conducting drug deals there within your house and on your phone and such things as that. But I think you just have to take a deep breath and figure out what's safe for you and how you need to protect you. You can't force your loved one to do anything. You can't force him to treatment, as I've already tried. I think you got to protect you in whatever. I don't know what that is, because I don't know your circumstances, but certainly I think that's the utmost importance today, is to say, hey, what do I need to do to protect myself?
Right. Let's see. Jenny says, what about if they will not work or go to school or college, and they have people giving them money behind your back?
Yeah. We certainly went through that with grandparents, with other family members, thinking that they were helping and certainly are hurting, and that's when we talk about this being a family disease. That's part of it, right? Is that if there's somebody in the family that's kind of going behind and circumventing the whole process, it's tough, and right. they don't learn the lesson. So if at all possible, I know my mom was a big enabler. And Zach went and lived with her for a while after I kicked him out, and she thought she was helping. And then, about 6 months into it, she started coming to Hope for Families. She started learning about the disease and the family aspect of it. And only till then did things start to get better, because she finally quit enabling and learned how she was actually contributing to the problem. But that's tough. If they're getting money from other family members, if you could try to get those family members to go to an Al-Anon meeting, or Hope for Families, or that kind of thing, it'll help them.
But I think ultimately ultimately, Jenna, you got to realize that that's not on your side of the street.
That's right.
In either which way, that is not on your side of the street. We actually have a video coming out in the next few weeks about what to do if there's like another adult enabling your loved one, which there's always a line, whether it's a friend, a family member, something. We've got a video about that coming out, but the big deal is you need to realize that's not your territory. Yep. If grandma thinks that she knows better, just like Scott did, let them go stay with grandma, because grandma's she's gonna figure it out real quick once it's in her house and she gets the front row seat. So sometimes the best thing I do is just let it backfire on them. Let it play out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Until she came face to face with his drug dealer in a bad situation, that's when she finally learned. But yeah.
I'm giggling because when your son was with us, he calls her Nanny. And he told us so many Nanny stories, and oh my God, they're so funny. But Nanny is something. Boy, she would go fight these drug dealers.
Yeah,
these gangster drug dealers. Nanny would just be not taking it. Cracks me up. Like, you did what? Oh, she wasn't having it.
That's funny now,
boundary, by the way.
Yeah.
Not a good boundary. Not advocating it. Just saying it's kind of funny.
Funny.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if we got any more questions. Jenny says, is it okay to set healthy boundaries when they are calling you from detox or mental facility via sectioning and continue to blame and say awful things that are totally false? I think you might have wrote that before we answered that, but yeah, just don't answer the call, or say you answer it between, 10 and 2, whatever.
Yeah. And hey, if you want to talk about, us and the dog and the weather and all that, I'll talk to you, but just set that boundary that we're not going to talk about how I'm going to get you out of the rehab. I'm not going to talk about how you're going to get out of detox. We can talk about other things, but if it's that, I just want to answer.
Right, because they're calling you, telling you how awful the staff is or the other clients are, because they're splitting. And if you'll just take 2 minutes and remember, every time they told other people the bad stuff about you, trying to get other people to rescue them from you, then you'd be like, oh yeah, that's splitting. Yeah. Not doing that. Exactly.
We'll have parents calling and saying, my son called and said he's bored to death up there. And I'll go, well, that's interesting, because they've been on a 3-day hiking trip, jumping off cliffs and skydiving and all these other things. And they say their kids calling and saying how bored they are. So you're right.
And then when they tell that to me, I say, you know what, that's good, because one important recovery thing is learn how to deal with boredom. So that's good. Right? Stop trying to control it, like boredom. Sometimes you're gonna get bored, and you gotta learn how to deal with that. So even if they are bored, that's good. Be glad about it. See what Ashley says. What happens when my husband calls needing help getting home? I say no, because I know what he's been doing out there, and then something bad happens, and I know I'll blame myself for not helping.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, you're setting the boundary, what you'll do and not do, but I would set the boundary and say, I'm not going to come get you. If you call me from a bar drunk at 12 o'clock at night, I'm not coming to get you.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's your boundary, and you can decide to do that. Now, if he chooses to go get drunk and he calls you at 12 o'clock, then, you can either choose not to answer or just say the word no. But certainly, you didn't cause him to go get drunk, and you wouldn't cause him to leave there and get hurt or hurt somebody. I know that's fearful. I used to fear all the time, more about Zach hurting somebody else. And I've got numerous stories where I knew he was out drinking, and, I called the law on him more than once, trying to get the police to arrest him before he could actually hurt somebody.
Right.
And that's tough. But certainly,
if it's not something you can live with, Ashley, and you want to keep doing it, then do it. If you can't live with that, but it's also okay. And you can also say, you know what, give me your phone. Let me download you the Uber app.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put it right here. Your information's in there.
Exactly.
You just hit the button. Like there's just a lot of ways to do that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great point, Amber, is that, we as parents, we can try to guide on what works for us and what works for others. But at the end of the day, you're the one that's got to lay down and sleep at night. So if you're not ready to set those boundaries yet, go get it. And until you're finally sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then maybe you might decide that. But I know as parents, I went to meetings probably for a year before I really started practicing a lot of what I was learning, because I just wasn't ready yet.
Right. Now, I say, it's better to not set a boundary than to set one and not be ready to keep it.
Exactly.
So, like parents sometimes ask me, like, is it okay to keep paying for their cell phone? Maybe the kid's out on the street. And I say, if it helps you sleep at night, that's what you're doing for you. So that counts. That's a boundary. I don't care. Pay for the cell phone because it's helping you sleep, like knowing that they could call you.
Exactly.
So it's not that you can't do any of these things. It's just that you can stop doing them when you don't want to anymore. Yeah. We are running out of time. You guys have been awesome. There's so many more questions on here, and we will try to go back through those and answer some of them we didn't get to. But if you are struggling with this and you would like to talk to Scott yourself, I'm going to put the link up for you guys on how you can get like a consult appointment with Scott if you want to. And if you go to this link too, you can hear Scott tell his whole story. And once you hear him tell his whole story, you're going to know he's done been there and back. Thanks for everybody for hanging out, and we'll see you next Thursday at 1. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. Have a great day.